So this is the video to review what we did on Thursday, September 16th and Friday, September 17th. And what we're focusing on in class, in addition to the causation with Alphonse the Camel, was the context of our new unit, the context of the growth of the Afro-Eurasian networks of exchange after 1200. So just to kind of bring us into what we're talking about, this is the same time period as the global tapestry. So on one hand, we're going to continue to look at the Vienna Yager and the Delhi Sultanate and the Kingdom of Mali in sub-Saharan Africa and Song China, but we're going to look at it through a different lens. And that lens is basically through exchange, how these states interactive. Now, government's going to be involved, but when we look at exchange, we're really moving to more of a use of economics or culture or things along those lines. So what we have going on is during this time period, the states of the global tapestry interacted across networks such as the Silk Road, the Indian Ocean system, and finally the Trans-Saharan network. Now, the Americas will not be in this unit because the Americans didn't interact with each other. They can't interact with each other because they don't have horses yet. And they can't interact with the Eastern Hemisphere, Afro-Eurasia, because they haven't been discovered yet. There's not the technology. So ultimately, at the end of the unit, we want to explain the causes and the effects of the growth of these exchanges after 1200. So before we get into the gory details, we have to establish the context. So today's video, today's question, and what you need to be able to answer by the end of this is to understand the context for the growth of the Afro-Eurasian networks after 1200. So we're focusing on this thing called context, and we're essentially providing the setting. So when we go through the rest of the unit, we can understand what's going on. So what is context? As we introduced at the beginning of the last unit, context is essentially the setting for whatever we're talking about. In the last unit, we were establishing the setting for the rise of those states during the global tapestry. And in this unit, we're describing the setting for the rise of these connections, these interactions along these trade routes. So when you write context, you're basically required to do two things. First, you have to accurately describe the setting. So you're going to describe it from more of a global perspective, not really including any specific historical evidence. But then you have to connect the specific focus of what you're talking about to that setting. Now, this is pretty complex, so I'm going to give you some examples. When you talk about establishing context, you can use two lines of reasoning or two strategies. You could lead up to it, or you can deal with the current context. Let me explain. When you focus on leading up to the context, you are describing the events, you're describing the developments that led up to your specific focus. When you're working with current context, and this is going to be your choice, you describe the broad world level events and developments that the topic you are focusing on is part of. So I know you're confused. I know there's a typo there, but let me kind of give you some examples. In the last unit, the very first day where we read the pink sheet, we established context using the strategy that we're going to describe the events and the developments that led up to the development of the tapestry states. So the context statement should read something along the lines of this. From 600 BCE to 600 CE, large empires ruled many parts of the world. These empires were able to rule large, diverse populations over greater distances. Due to political, economic, and cultural issues and the invasions from outsiders, all of these empires collapsed by 600. By 1200, much of America and Asia had recovered from the decline of the first wave of empires. In these regions, new land empires and trading states emerged that continued the success of past process of government, but developed new and improved ones that unified, ruled, and provided for their diverse populations over greater distances. Okay, so this is an example of a context where we lead up to what our focus is. Our focus is the global tapestry. So to further break it down, this area highlighted in red, these are the events and the developments that led up to it. We have empires from 600 to 600, but unfortunately they fell. So then we got to begin to connect. So we're connecting it chronologically. So the next step in the development, 1200, we see the return of these empires, but we also see new trading states. And these trading states and empires, they use stuff from the past and they develop new things. Okay, so this is one way to establish context. But since we're dealing with the skill of causation for this unit, we can't use this because if we were to contextualize using this method, all we're doing is regurgitating causes. And that's not what we want to do. So what we do is we use the method of current contextualization. So before I get into this, I want you to do something for me. I want you to stop and I want you to understand and be able to answer what is occurring after 1200. And then I want you to understand why it's happening. Then, since this unit is about trade and exchange, we have to connect or explain how trade was part of this. So before we get to the big long paragraph, just really quickly jot down some ideas to answer these three questions. Press pause now. Okay, welcome back. So I know that this is a little bit difficult, so let me go over how I would answer these. The very first thing that I would bring out is that after 1200, we see the rise of not only new land empires, but we also see the rise of trading states. Between 1200 and 1450, we see the rise of these two political things. And the reason why they emerged, why they developed, is not only to replace the old ones, but also people realized that being a member of these empires would benefit and help them survive and prosper. So now we got to connect trade in. So why would a state, a land empire or a trading state, why would they encourage trade? And essentially, what I would say is that individually, they encourage trade out of these states because it's a way to make your life better. It's a way to earn wealth. If I'm a merchant, essentially, I'm going to go off trade and do a bunch of stuff and make a bunch of money. If I'm a farmer, I'm going to also want this trade to go on because I can buy luxury goods, but also the demand for food goes up. If I'm a state, on the other hand, I'm really encouraging this trade because it helps my unity. People are going to be more happier because they're getting all this stuff going on. The other thing is that it's a way for me as a ruler to bring in important tax money. Okay, so let's put all this together in a contextualization statement. So a contextualization statement is about 4 or 5 sentences. So in this model, we're using the current. We're describing the broad world events and developments, and then we're connecting the topic, which is trade, that we're focusing on to it. So, after 1200, new empires and trading states emerged across the world, especially in Afro-Eurasia. People were willing to come under the rule of these because it allowed them to survive and prosper better than if they were not under a state rule. The governments of these new trading states and land empires looked to further enhance their power and unity by promoting long-distance trade over the networks of exchange. Trade routes like the Silk Road, the Trans-Sahara route, the Indian Ocean system provided the opportunity for states and individuals to bring in wealth that would enhance people's survival and property and provide needed income for states. So when we break it down, the red is our current, what's going on. So we know that there's land and we know that there's trading states. Now, I know I didn't put it in there, but what I established is that there's all sorts of states developing. In green, well, that's my connection. So now I'm beginning to kind of move toward my topic, which is exchange or trade. So that green, I'm beginning to situate, and the blue further connects trade to what's going on. Essentially, we know that between 1200 and 1450, land empires and trading states are emerging, and they're promoting trade as a means to bring in wealth, to make the people happy, to promote survival and prosperity, and to provide needed income. So this is the context. So this is a little bit difficult, but we need to be thinking on this because when we write essays, context is going to be the first thing that we write. It's our opening paragraph. And what we're doing is saying, okay, this is the time period that I'm talking about, and this is how things connect in. Okay? This is something that is going to take you a couple times to practice to get good at. But also remember that it requires knowledge of what's going on during these time periods.